Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 54 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 16, the second round of your fantasy football playoffs, and the rest of your 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, I want to give you thanks for holding down the fort this past Sunday on our live show. I was on vacation. Nick was doing the live show at 5:30 in the morning, my time. So Nick held down the fort there. I jumped in the chat and tried to give you guys some opinions. So I did join in there. It is Week 16 now. We are going on to the second round of our fantasy football playoffs. How are you feeling? Because I'm not feeling too good. I got Lamar'd, and that was not a lot of fun.
So I have one team on bye. I got two playing, and I got two that got eliminated in Week 15. In Week 14, they got eliminated. One of them I won very handily. I have 217 points in that league. Normal PPR scoring with Cooper Kupp. With his goose egg in there. So my team just went all out and went nuclear. Another one is coming down to this Monday night matchup. You guys will have already seen it. I need about 13, 14 points from Sam Darnold. It is 0.05 points for passing yards, so a little bit more of an inflation there. Hopefully I can get to that. He scored 24 in this format earlier this year, which is why I went with him over Jared Goff, who I had on the old bus team. We don't need to talk about that for too long. But bad take for the old bus team for myself. But hopefully Darnold can come through tonight, and hopefully I got 3 more games to talk about on our Thursday show for myself.
You're former Jet. But we do have a lot to talk about, guys. It's the first show in Week 16. Thank you all for joining. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining, and thank you if you joined that live show and now joined this one. So if you're not here, heard about our live shows, we do a live show every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time during the fantasy football season. We'll have one this Sunday, and I will be on for that one. I'll be in New York for that one, which is pretty sweet. Home for the holidays. So I'll be home for that one. This is the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. You can find us on YouTube and all audio streaming platforms. We're also on social media. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, hit a like on this video, and hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. If you're looking for an audio streaming platform, we're on all of them. Give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're on Apple, on Spotify, we'd appreciate that. This is our Tuesday show, our first show. Going into Week 16, we're going to give you a waiver wire. It gets shorter and shorter as the weeks goes on due to the nature of the waiver wire, but we're still going to help you out with the rest of your season. And then we give you our top 5 takeaways from this week. At this point in the season, it's kind of a trend of season, but that's okay. Let's kick things off with the waiver wire going to Week 16. At the moment, we don't have any quarterbacks on the waiver wire. It's kind of just the same quarterbacks that we've been saying for the past couple of weeks. Tua, Goff, etc. If they're on your waiver wire, go get them. But nobody at this point that's on your waiver wire that you're probably going to go get. The percentages are way too high. We base our percentages in this segment off of ESPN Fantasy. So we're going to kick things off with the running backs. Jerome Ford will be the lead back for the Browns going forward. Nick Chubb broke his foot, owned in 32% of leagues. Tajay Spears had a 20-plus point fantasy performance, owned in 43% of leagues. Justice Hill had another touchdown, owned in 22% of leagues, and Kendre Miller owned in 8% of leagues. I think Jerome Ford and Tajay Spears should definitely be owned, and I think Justice Hill is an option if you do need a flex play or a running back play.
Yeah, I agree. I like Jerome Ford for sure. Tajay Spears, I wish that this happened 2 weeks ago because I feel like it's too late to immediately plug him into your lineup. He looked really good, and he got a lot of the touches this past week, so we definitely want to see what it looks like. And Nick and I have been high on Tony Pollard for a few weeks. Nick a little bit higher than I, and it's been that backfield in those matchups that we liked, and Tajay now tearing into that. Concern for the rest of the playoffs for Pollard for sure, but again, I don't know if you could comfortably start him unless we see some news. Jerome Ford will be a 3-down back in that backfield. I mean, there's been so many injuries over there. Sucks to see Nick Chubb get another season ender back-to-back years. It happens. Kendre Miller I threw on here because it's a little bit of a sneaky one. Alvin Kamara did get dinged up in this past game, and if he does miss time, it will be Kendre Miller's backfield. He's gotten so much hype for the last 2 years to eventually succeed. Alvin Kamara, and Kamara is just not fallen off at all in that time. So if he's missing time, it will be Kendre Miller's backfield. And we know that if they roll out Rattler, who looked a lot better than Jake Hayner, maybe you get some upside in that spot and more of a start-worthy play than some of the other guys on the list.
All right, for receivers, we have Rashad Bateman owned in 19% of leagues, Jalen McMillan owned in 10% of leagues, Calvin Austin owned in 3% of leagues, and Jalen Coker owned in 1% of leagues. I said last week that I think McMillan needs to be owned in all leagues, and I'll reiterate that statement. McMillan needs to be owned in all leagues at this point, no matter what platform you're on.
For sure, Buck's offense looks great. He's slid into Godwin's role the last 2 weeks. He's looked really, really solid, had 2 really solid fantasy days with that. Can't complain. Bateman, we know the up and downness. I think a lot of people are going to target him now that Deontay Johnson is getting cut from the Ravens. I don't think I will trust Rashad Bateman in my lineup. Jalen Coker is the sneaky one, and if you're in a dynasty or a keeper format, I really like him as an option. This is another really solid game. He got injured a few weeks back, but since then he has an 8 target. There's 2 games since he had I think back-to-back really good ones, and he had 8 targets in the one where he got hurt, and then he just had a 6 targets. I think it was 4 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. It was a really solid week. So I'm interested in rostering Coker. I don't know if you're going to start him for the playoffs, but if you're in those long-term formats, I think he's a really, really sneaky play.
Then we have some tight ends here. Brenton Strange with the Jaguars owned in 2% of leagues with Evan Ingram out this week. And then we have Chig Okonkwo, who I told you guys to play this week, owned in 5% of leagues. Honestly, I don't think I'd stream either of them. I like the Okonkwo this week because of that Bengals defense, but I wouldn't stream him going forward. Strange maybe, but I think it's tough sledding at this point if you didn't take our advice and grab Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith a couple weeks ago.
I agree. I do kind of like Strange. If you got Njoku, who's now out, if you got Ingram, who's now out, if you've got concerns with your tight end position, I don't mind it because Mac Jones has always heavily targeted the tight end position. I do not mind him as your replacement tight end for the next 2 weeks based off the workload that you saw. But I mean, I'm not rushing to grab these guys over the running backs that are available.
And lastly, if you have to stream a defense, Falcons hosting the Giants, the Colts hosting the Titans, the Bills hosting the Pats, and the Packers hosting the Saints.
I mean, I really want that. Yeah, all of them really solid. I really want that Packers option if it's available and out there to you. I think the Bills are going to be available in a lot of leagues, that back-to-back weeks, Rams, Lions. If they did not drop them, I don't know how comfortable you are going to be playing them. So I think they might be available in a lot more leagues than you would expect them to be at this point of the year because you tend to drop your defenses when it's a tough schedule. But I think the Bills are a really solid one. The Falcons, you'll see tonight how they look against the Raiders. Bit of a trap spot with Desmond Ridder returning. I don't want to talk about the game because you guys know more than I do about it. But if they do look good in the game, the Raiders offense doesn't look good, I would definitely rush to start to get the Falcons defense on my team.
Going now to your waiver wire. I'm not the waiver. I'm sorry about that. We just did the waiver wire. Your top 5 takeaways from week 15, Nick. And if you haven't heard this segment before, if you're a new listener, we basically just give you 5 takeaways. There's no order, no rhyme or reason. Normally there's a theme, at least from Nick. I don't have a theme this week, but Nick can talk about whatever theme he has. So I'll let you go first with your first takeaway from week 15.
So here's the theme. We always run with it. We'll run with a different theme every week. And I got a good one for this week. It is going to be called Legend or Let Down. Taking a look at some of the legendary veterans on your fantasy football team, age 29 or older. You'll see why it's 29, not 30 later on, who either carried your team to glory in the first week or dragged it down to chaos. And I think that there's a lot of places we could start, but there's no better place to start than a QB wide receiver stack that definitely won you your fantasy football week. QB4 on the week, wide receiver 1 so far in Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Adams has been on an absolute tear. I had him in my takeaways. I teased that I would have him on the all-boom team this past week, and I knew I was going to do it. 12 targets, 9 catches, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, nearly a third, tackled at the 1 on another deep pass later on in the game. His last 6 games, 22, 9, 13. Then he had the bye week, his 3 games since then, 18, 26, and 43. His target share in those 6 games, 11, 13, 7, 12, 11, 12. That's 5 games out of 6 with double-digit targets. He is the wide receiver 1 over the last 3 weeks since their bye week. And then we talk about Aaron Rodgers. Oh, he's washed. He stinks. That's what every single one of you fans wanted to tell me Well, he's a QB 12 on the year. He's 11th in yards and 8th in touchdowns with a coaching and an offensive coordinator change this year. I don't want to hear it. I think that he's on a tear. He's more so recovering from that Achilles injury. I know they're not pulling out the wins, but almost all their games have been a one-possession finish. 30 points this week, QB4 at this point. 290 yards, 45 yards on the ground. We like that mobility from our quarterbacks. Way to go, Aaron. His last 7 games, 13 touchdowns, 1 pick, 237 yards per game. He is trending the exact opposite of Kirk Cousins from the Achilles injury recovery. Next week, your New York Jets will be going up against the Rams, traveling West Coast to East Coast. We like that spot, and that is a defense that has definitely been susceptible to wide receivers and running back and quarterbacks throughout the course of the season. So once again, going to copy and paste. Really love the matchup, and I think these are 2 savvy vets that are going to help win you some money, especially my guy Devontae.
Kind of meshing the waiver wire segment here with our top 5 takeaways. But my takeaway here is that I think Jalen McMillan might end up being a league winner. This last 2 weeks, he has 9 receptions on 13 targets, 134 yards, and 3 touchdowns on an offense that is top 3 in yards per game, top 3 in points per game. Baker Mayfield is top 3 in those stats as well. And his schedule looks pretty good here. He has the Dallas Cowboys next, who allowed the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Then the Carolina Panthers. I know they played the Bucs really tough a couple weeks ago. The Bucs are really close to winning that division. It's going to be an important game. So I think not only should McMillan be picked up, I think he should be starting in your lineups over a slew of names who have disappointed you. There's a name on my list right here that I would personally start him over the rest of the playoffs. And why don't I just jump to it? I'm an Isaiah Pacheco owner, and I'm not thrilled about it. The team that Pacheco is on has most definitely lost at this point, probably partly because of Pacheco scoring a whopping 5 points. Kareem Hunt, when he was a starter, had double-digit fantasy points in 8 out of 9 weeks as the starter for the Chiefs. Pacheco has under 9 fantasy points in all 3 games since he's regained the starting role. He just looks bad. He looks slow. He looks bad. He's not getting the opportunities. Now you look at his last 2 matchups. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Houston Texans, both top 10 in allowing the fewest points to fantasy running backs. Pacheco's going to lose you a fantasy championship. And if you have the option to bench him, you should. If he's in your flex spot or something like that, he should not be started for the rest of your fantasy football playoffs. All right, your second takeaway, since I just jumped on 2 takeaways.
Well, I'll stick with the Kansas City Chiefs, and we'll keep talking about them. I talked about 2 guys that are going off. Well, I got a good saying for this one, and it is the end of the Eras tour for Travis Kelce.
Oh no, that's not good for me.
That is not good. It's not good for me either, because I got a playoffs riding on him. My most expensive buy-in that's left anyways. But so here's how he's looked. His last 5 weeks has not cracked the top 10. He's averaging 9 points per game in those 5. No touchdowns in that span. He only has 2 touchdowns on the year, which is kind of surprising. I really didn't expect that when I looked at his numbers, but definitely a concern. Now you look at the backup. Noah Gray in that span has 2 top 10 performances, 5 touchdowns on the year, and he's averaging 14 points per game in his last 5. Mahomes likely going to miss the rest of your fantasy football playoffs. So here comes the big question. Can you and should you bench Travis Kelce?
I'm not going to cut you off, but he's played with this same injury a bunch of times. I think he'll be back for at least the championship.
I don't think they're going to force it. No, because championship, I believe, is the Steelers on a short week on Wednesday on Christmas. So I don't think they're going to rush him out there to go up against that defensive front. The
Bills are right there. They don't want to lose that 1 seed.
Especially if Wentz wins this week, they're pretty much not going to lose that 1 spot. So I think they could afford to let that Steelers one go. But here's why I would not bench Travis Kelce. Nick, who is Travis Kelce's new quarterback for this upcoming week expectedly?
Mr. Carson Wentz.
It is Carson Wentz. And what does Carson Wentz love to do?
He's a stat sheet stuffer.
Yes, he is. And you know who he loves to target?
I'm assuming it's tight ends.
It is the tight end position. He was drafted in 2016, had 4 good years, I would say, with the Eagles statistically, 2016 through 2019. And who was his tight end in that time? Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz in those 4 seasons finished tight end 6, tight end 3, tight end 2, tight end 4, all with Carson Wentz as his quarterback. Now, I am not saying that Carson Wentz is going to be better than Patrick Mahomes, but what I am going to tell you to do is I think Kansas City is going to have to do a lot more passing to win games versus game management. I know they will try to, but I think that Travis Kelce will need to step it up to win some games down the stretch. I don't think Mahomes will be out for the year. But hypothetically, if he is out for the playoffs, right? Let's say the injury is way worse than we thought. How funny would it be to watch Carson Wentz beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl? I think that'd be a fun storyline. And we know the
That
NFL
would
loves
be funny.
stories. That would be a good one.
That'd be a good one. I also want to say, I think they lose the 1 seed if they lose one game and the Bills take command.
The Bills have 3 losses because they lost to the Rams last week.
You're correct.
So
next week
Kansas City needs to drop
reasons.
too, and Buffalo needs to win out.
All right. My next take here is to just play your matchups when you see a good matchup, especially when it comes to streaming options. Take the risk in your fantasy football championship or your fantasy playoffs. Now, by risk, I don't mean, you don't bench Justin Jefferson, but take a risk if you need to. The Bengals are bad against tight ends and they're bad against the pass. They allow the most fantasy points, 2 tight ends, an average of 13.8. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but I told you guys to pick up Chiggy Okonkwo last week. I said to play him. He was on the all-boom team. He had 13.9 points. Again, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but for a tight end that you just picked up, that's a really good chunk of change. Next week, there's David Njoku. You know that J-Bo loves to feed him. You know J-Bo loves to throw the ball. I think that Cincy game is going to produce a whopping a lot of points, especially from the Cincy side. If you Jerry Jeudy, if you Njoku, make sure they're both locked in. So again, look at the matchups, listen to us, and play those matchups.
I got a Travis Kelce versus Njoku question for my lineup if I can make it past this week now. So good to know, Nick.
All right, your third takeaway.
So you talked about one Bucs receiver. I got to talk about the other, Mr. Consistency, Mike Evans, who once again delivers for you in a big way, going up against the Chargers. Very tough spot, one of the best defenses all year in football and in fantasy football. 9 catches on 11 targets, 159 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Since he came back from the injury, in his 4 games, he is the wide receiver 4. He's got 9 touchdowns in his 11 games, and he is on the hunt for his 1,000-yard season. He has not hit that yet. He still needs 251 yards over the next 3 weeks. We know Baker's a baller, and he's going to hook his boys up. We know he's definitely going to target his guy, Mike Evans, and try and hit that number before the end of the season. So we're going to bank on this next week being a big one. Nick talked about Dallas. Well, they lost Trayvon Diggs for the year. It is a great spot to carry the momentum. And then your championship week, you do not have to see Marshawn Lattimore, who's been his one kryptonite his entire year. So that's the only 2 things that you got to worry about. And we definitely think Mike Evans is going to help hoist the trophy for a lot of people.
Big Mike needs to average 84 yards a game, by the way, to get to his 1,000-yard mark for the 9th or 8th.
Yes, he does.
All right. My 4th takeaway is complaining work sometimes. The Eagles receivers are complaining. There's coaches yelling, defensive end, yada, yada, yada. So what happens? Devontae Smith is a wide receiver 5 on the week with a whopping 28 points, and A.J. Brown is a whopping 25 points, or wide receiver 9 on the week. They threw it. If you had Saquon Barkley, sorry to hear that. I have Saquon Barkley going next week. I had a bye in both of my leagues that I have Saquon on, so he got his dud out of the way. So I'm really hoping the dud's out of the way, and now we can move on and we can get some Saquon going next week. But big games from your Eagles receivers. They complained. There's a lot of controversy this week. The Eagles are an interesting team. So it just sounds like there's like a mess. The coaches, I saw the clip of Sirianni getting yelled at, I think, by the offensive line coach. The players seem to not like each other. It's like there's so much controversy around a team that's gelling so well in the field. It's really, really interesting. I think Sirianni also is like 4th in winning percentage, like all time or something ridiculous like that as head coach. Terrible, because I don't think he's a good head coach. But he's winning. Team's winning. Really talented. So complaining works. So if you need a star player to produce, maybe shoot him a tweet and see if he'll complain. Maybe he puts a little tweet out. Maybe that's what you do.
I actually had a big debate the other night about Nick Sirianni. I said he's one of the most underrated head coaches in football, but we could take that offline sometime.
Man. All right, your 4th takeaway. What do you got?
So I went good, bad, good. So I guess we got to revisit the bad, and we are going to talk about the king who has fallen, and that is Derrick Henry. Now, he has been a very efficient runner on the ground, but Nick, what did we say about Derrick Henry? What does he need to score? Touchdowns. Because in fantasy football, you need touchdowns or you need receptions. And Derrick Henry, well, he does not get receptions. He only goes for touchdowns. That's kind of been the story of his season. So since week 9, Derrick Henry has not cracked 15 points. For a guy that reprojected to be one of the top 2 running back across fantasy, that is just not good enough. He has only cracked 100 yards in that span as well. So maybe you're thinking, oh, maybe you get some work in the passing game and that will work. No, he only has 1 or 2 games all year with more than 2 targets this entire season. And this is now the third week in a row without a touchdown. Lamar is fighting for that MVP. They're trying to steal the division. And this upcoming week, they have their biggest game of the year up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think Derrick Henry is going to perform. Earlier this year, a few weeks back when they faced 10.5 points, his second lowest game of the season, I think he's very much going to struggle. And I think it's very possible next week Derrick Henry loses you a fantasy championship, because I do not think you could pivot off a player like Derrick Henry with that volume, and he has been an efficient runner. But you need touchdowns or catches, and he has just not been getting either for the last few weeks.
My last takeaway, and we talked about it a lot, but I think I'm comfortable at this point possibly saying this is the best rookie fantasy class of a single season as rookies that we've seen. Your quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels is your quarterback 6. He had 23.6 this week. Bo Nix is your quarterback 9, 16.5 points this week. Caleb Williams is your quarterback 17, hasn't played as of this podcast. And then Drake May is your quarterback 22, which seems low, but he had 18.5 fantasy points. And ever since he started, he's been pretty good. So you have three or four rookie quarterbacks who have played very, very well this season. Then look at your receivers. You have Brian Thomas Jr., he's a wide receiver 7 at 32.5 points this week. Emily Neighbors, a wide receiver 9, 24.2 points. Both of them are matchup proof and probably should be in your lineups for the rest of the season. And then Brock Bowers, I don't have his point total from tonight, but he'll still be the tight end 1 after tonight. So my point being, it's really cool when you see all these rookies produce a lot. And I didn't even put Ladd McConkey in. McConkey's had a really good season too. He had another touchdown this week. I totally forgot to put McConkey in. That's hand up. That's on me. But it's really cool to see the rookies produce. It's really cool when a lot of these rookies were drafted like later on in your drafts, probably rounds 8 or later. You took the chance on the rookie and they really did pay off this year. I know we don't have any running backs in here. Tracy's been okay, but this wasn't a good running back class. You can't even say this is a terrible running back class before the season even started. We knew we weren't getting good running backs in this class. So the fact that we have this much success is really, really impressive. And I have to tip my cap to these rookies and what they've done. And the fact that you can trust them to win your fantasy football championships.
Yeah. I know you didn't mention him, but Bucky Irving has had a very good year. I'm trying to pull up his
Yes, I should have mentioned Bucky Irving. You're correct. That's a guy that I was all over.
He is the RB16 on the year so far. He has one bad game 2 weeks ago where he exited early with injury, but last 4 games, 27, the bad game where he got hurt in, and then 14. So this week, 13 this week. So pretty solid performances from him.
Good call. And then Tracy, I was trying to get Tracy's number. Tracy's running back 28. I mean, he's on a really tough offense right now, but he's had a couple good weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really get the starting workload until Singletary got hurt.
Yeah, and even still, they kind of like
he got the delayed start.
So.
All right, last one over here we are going to talk about, and this is why I had to say 29 instead of 30. I was actually surprised this guy is under 30 because it feels like he has been in this league running the ball forever. It's your RB10 on the year, James Conner. His last 3 games, 17 carries, 18 carries, 16 carries. And I talked about Derrick Henry not getting over 3 targets. Well, James Conner has no problem in the target category, 4, 4, and 5 in his last 3, averages about 4 targets per game over the course of the season. And he's averaging over 20 points per game in his last 3. He had 2 touchdowns this week. And listen, I don't know if there is a better year-to-year playoff performer than my guy, James Conner. 2022, over the course of the playoffs, he was the RB6. 2023 was the RB4. And this week, I know we got 2 more games to go for your fantasy playoffs, but he's currently the RB1. Next week, he gets Carolina, who just allowed Rico Dowdle to rush for 150 yards. Then he gets the Rams, who he scored 20 points on earlier this year. So James Conner is going to help, again, carry people to fantasy championships like he has the last 2 years. And good for him, because this is a guy that got overshadowed. He got a lot of hate in Pittsburgh for his inability to stay healthy and be on that football field and be an inefficient runner. And now he's gone over to Arizona and for 3 straight years has been a fantasy football stud for your playoffs and for your fantasy football teams.
All right. Well, that is our first show heading into week 16. Thank you guys for the support and for watching and all that other stuff. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to drop a like on this video. We'd really appreciate that. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Next time you hear from us will most likely be, it really has to be Thursday. So we'll talk to you guys on Thursday, all boom and all bust teams for week 16. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform, make sure you're subscribed, give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you have any questions in the meantime, Twitter is PrimeTime FF Pod. Instagram is PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you guys again. And set those waiver wires, and we'll talk to you guys on Thursday.